The sun bleeds across the desert sky, a bruised purple and orange melting into the horizon. Here, by the churning, muddy waters of the Nile, the air is thick with the dust of 1,000 generations. It carries the smell of sweat, of fear, of something ancient and unyielding. The rhythmic crack of the taskmaster's whip cuts through the drone of 1,000,000 voices, a chorus of forced labour, a symphony of suffering. Blocks of stone, impossibly heavy, scrape against the earth, dragged by hands calloused and broken. The breath catches in the throat, a gasp stolen by the vastness of the enterprise, by the relentless will of a pharaoh who sees human beings as mere components in his grand, immortal design. Listen closely. Beneath the groans and the curses, beneath the shouts of the overseers, there is a different sound, a murmur, a whisper. It passes from father to son, from mother to daughter, a story told in hushed tones around fires that burn low against the desert chill. It speaks of a promise, of a land flowing with milk and honey, of a freedom that feels as distant as the stars now piercing the deepening twilight. For 400 years this people, the children of Israel, have toiled in this foreign land, their dreams slowly calcifying under the relentless Egyptian sun. They are a nation in chains, their identity forged in the crucible of servitude, yet their spirit, though battered, has never entirely broken. And this is where our story begins, not with the grand pronouncements of kings, nor the clash of armies, but with the quiet, agonizing question that echoes through every generation. What does it truly mean to lead a people burdened by history, haunted by memory and driven by an uncompromising dream? What does it cost, this impossible burden of guiding a nation forged in the crucible of despair toward a future that exists only in the mind's eye? How do you take a collective groan and transform it into a collective roar? How do you awaken a dormant faith and turn it into an unstoppable force? And what happens when the very leader called to this impossible task is himself a man of paradox, caught between two worlds? Imagine a young man, perhaps in his 20s, walking through the bustling streets of Memphis. He wears the finest linen, his sandals are soft leather, his education is that of the royal court. He is Moses, adopted son of Pharaoh's daughter, raised in the gilded cage of Egyptian power. He understands the intricate workings of this vast empire, its laws, its gods, its absolute authority. He speaks its language, knows its customs, and moves with the confidence of one destined for greatness within its ranks. Yet, something within him, a deep, unsettling current, pulls him toward the other side, toward the brickyards and the suffering, toward the people who are not his by birth, but who are undeniably his by blood. He carries the weight of a secret, a heritage whispered to him in childhood, a truth that chafes against the comfort of his privileged life. One sweltering afternoon, the secret becomes a scream. He witnesses an Egyptian taskmaster brutally beating an Israelite slave. The injustice, the sheer, unadulterated cruelty, ignites a fire within him that no royal tutor could ever extinguish. In that moment, the two worlds he inhabits collide with devastating force. He acts, swiftly, decisively. With a surge of primal fury, he strikes down the Egyptian, burying his body in the sand, hoping to bury the truth along with it. But secrets, especially those born of such violence, rarely stay buried. He is seen. His act of rebellion, an impulsive outburst of empathy and rage, shatters his carefully constructed life. He is no longer Prince Moses of Egypt. He is a fugitive, a killer, a man without a home, fleeing into the desolate wastes of Midian, leaving behind the only life he has ever known. For 40 years he wanders. He marries, raises children, becomes a shepherd, tending his flock in the stark, silent beauty of the desert. He learns patience, humility, the rhythms of the earth, and the profound solitude of a man alone with his thoughts. The memories of Egypt, of the screams and the whips, of his own terrible act, recede into the background, becoming a dull ache rather than a burning wound. He believes his destiny is now simple, a quiet life, far from the machinations of power, far from the cries of the oppressed. He has made his choice, or so he thinks. But history, like the desert wind, has a way of finding you no matter how far you run. Before we go further, tell us where you're watching this from. drop it in the comments below. And if this story of a prince turned fugitive, of a whisper turning into a scream, has already captured your imagination, subscribe to our channel now. Every episode unearths forgotten truths and brings these monumental figures to life. Moses, a shepherd in the wilderness, thought his past was behind him. But the desert, often seen as a place of barrenness, is also where the most profound transformations occur. And it was there, amidst the silent ancient rocks, that a voice would call to him from a burning bush, demanding that he return to the very place he had sworn never to see again, to confront the most powerful man on earth and to lead a nation of slaves to freedom, an impossible task for an unwilling leader that would reshape the very course of human history. The air shimmered, not with the heat of the desert, but with an otherworldly glow. Moses, a man now in his 80s, his beard long and streaked with grey, his face etched with the wisdom of the wilderness, stood before a bush that burned but was not consumed. This was not a mirage. This was a presence, a voice that thrummed through the very ground beneath his feet. It was a voice that knew his name, knew his history, and knew the cries of his people. It was the voice of the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, a God who'd not forgotten his covenant, even after 4 centuries of silence. And that voice gave Moses a command: Go to Pharaoh, and bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. Imagine the weight of those words. Moses, a man who had fled in fear, who had spent 4 decades tending sheep, was now being asked to confront the most powerful empire on earth. His own voice, he argued, was not eloquent. He was slow of speech and slow of tongue. He was a murderer, a nobody, a shepherd. How could he, a man who had failed once before, now stand before Pharaoh and demand the release of an entire nation? But the voice was insistent. It promised power, signs, and a brother, Aaron, to speak for him. It promised a victory that would defy all logic, all military might, all human expectation. It promised freedom. So Moses returned. He returned to the land of his birth, to the gilded halls where he had once walked as a prince, now a humble shepherd with a staff in his hand and an impossible mission in his heart. The reunion with his brother Aaron must have been a moment of profound emotion. 2 men bound by blood and by a destiny they could barely comprehend. Together they stood before the elders of Israel, performing the signs given to them by God, a staff turning into a serpent, a hand becoming leprous and then whole again. The people, battered and broken by generations of slavery, saw these signs and believed. A flicker of hope, long extinguished, began to glow in their weary eyes. Then came the confrontation of Pharaoh, a man who considered himself a living god, sat on his throne surrounded by his priests and his armies, a picture of absolute unchallengeable power. And into this formidable presence stepped Moses and Aaron, 2 old men bearing a message that was both an insult and a threat. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go. Pharaoh's response was immediate and contemptuous. Who is the Lord that I should obey his voice to let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, nor will I let Israel go. He not only refused but intensified the labour, demanding the Israelites make bricks without straw, pushing them to the brink of utter despair. This was the beginning of a titanic struggle, not just between 2 men, but between 2 opposing worldviews, the absolute power of an earthly king versus the unseen, a transcendent power of a divine will. It was a battle for the very soul of a people, and for the recognition of a God who demanded justice. One by one, the plagues descended upon Egypt, each more devastating than the last, each a direct challenge to the gods of Egypt, each a testament to the power of the God of Israel. Water turned to blood, frogs swarmed, gnats and flies tormented, livestock perished, boils erupted, hail rained down, locusts devoured, darkness enveloped the land. Imagine the terror, the confusion, the growing despair in Egypt. Pharaoh's magicians, at first able to mimic some of the signs, were soon overwhelmed, forced to admit this is the finger of God. Yet, Pharaoh's heart remained hardened. Each plague brought him to the brink of concession, only for him to pull back, his pride, his power, his very identity as a god-king refusing to bend. He saw the suffering of his people, the destruction of his land, but his will was unyielding. This was a man utterly consumed by his own authority, unable to comprehend a power greater than his own. He was a force of nature, but facing a force far more ancient, far more powerful. What would it take to break such a will? What ultimate price would be demanded for freedom? The tension built with each passing plague, each refusal, each desperate plea from Moses met with stubborn defiance. The people of Israel, witnessing these miracles, felt their faith surge and then falter as Pharaoh's grip only tightened. They questioned Moses. They questioned God. Was this freedom or a prolonged agony? The final plague, the one that would shatter Pharaoh's resolve and forever alter the course of history, was yet to come. It would be a plague so terrible, so profound, that it would leave an indelible mark on every household in Egypt and on the collective memory of humanity. It would be a night of unspeakable sorrow for one nation and a night of miraculous deliverance for another. What do you think was the most shocking of the 10 plagues? Share your thoughts in the comments and prepare yourself, because the cost of freedom would be paid in blood and the journey that followed would demand a faith far greater than any miracle. The night was alive with a terrible silence, a silence that pressed down on every home in Egypt, heavy with a dread that transcended the physical. Inside the homes of the children of Israel, however, there was a different kind of tension, the frantic energy of preparation, the smell of roasted lamb, unleavened bread, and bitter herbs. They ate in haste, fully dressed, staffs in hand, ready to flee. The blood of a lamb marked their doorposts, a sign of protection, a promise of deliverance. This was the Passover, the night of the 10th plague, the ultimate confrontation between the God of Israel and the gods of Egypt. And then it came. A cry, piercing and agonizing, erupted from every Egyptian household. From the grandest palace to the humblest hovel, the firstborn, both human and animal, fell silent. Death, a swift and invisible hand, swept through the land, leaving behind a wake of unimaginable grief. Pharaoh, who had boasted he did not know the Lord, now knew him in the most devastating way possible. His own firstborn son was among the fallen. His defiance, his pride, his very soul shattered in that single terrible night. Imagine Pharaoh, a man who had held absolute power, now broken, his face streaked with tears, his voice hoarse with sorrow. In the depths of his despair, he finally capitulated. Go! Go, you and the children of Israel! Serve the Lord as you have said. He not only commanded them to leave, but urged them, practically begging them to go quickly. The Egyptians, terrified, overwhelmed by the horror, pressed gifts upon the Israelites, silver, gold, clothing, anything to hasten their departure. After 430 years, the chains were finally broken. A nation of slaves, 600,000 men, besides women and children, a vast multitude poured out of Egypt, led by Moses, into the vast, so unknown wilderness. Their exodus was not a quiet retreat. It was a triumphant yet terrifying march into uncertainty. Guided by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, they moved with a sense of both awe and apprehension. They were free, yes, but free to what? Free to face the scorching sun, the barren lands, the gnawing hunger, and the constant threat of thirst. Their journey was not merely physical, it was a journey of transformation, from a slave mentality to a free people, a journey that would test their faith at every turn. But Pharaoh's broken will was fleeting. As soon as the immediate horror subsided, his hardened heart returned. The humiliation, the economic devastation, the loss of his workforce gnawed at him. He gathered his chariots, his 600 chosen chariots, and all the chariots of Egypt, along with his entire army, and set out in pursuit. He would bring them back. He would reclaim what he believed was his. Imagine the scene. The Israelites, a vast disorganized multitude, find themselves trapped. Before them, the impassable waters of the Red Sea. Behind them, the thunder of approaching chariots, the glint of Egyptian spears in the distance. The dust cloud of Pharaoh's army rises like a terrifying storm. Panic erupts. The people, who had just witnessed the plagues, who had just walked out of bondage, now cried out in terror, "Why have you brought us out here to die in the wilderness? Was it not better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness?" Their faith, so newly kindled, flickered and threatened to die. Moses, however, stood firm. his voice, though perhaps trembling, and carried the conviction of a man who had heard the voice of God. "Do not be afraid. Stand firm and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Then, at God's command, he stretched out his hand over the sea. The wind began to howl, a mighty relentless east wind blowing all through the night. The waters began to part slowly at first, then with an awesome, terrifying power, creating a path, a dry corridor, through the very heart of the sea. Walls of water, towering and immense, stood on either side, a testament to a power beyond human comprehension. The Israelites, awestruck and terrified, walked across on dry ground, 1,000,000 people making their way through the impossible. But the Egyptians, blinded by their rage and their desire for retribution, pursued them into the divided sea. They saw the path and they followed, their chariots thundering into the watery canyon. The walls of water, which had been a passage for the Israelites, became a trap for their pursuers. As the last Israelite stepped onto the other side, Moses again stretched out his hand, and the waters collapsed. The roaring torrent engulfed Pharaoh's army, his chariots, his horses, and his men. Not one of them survived. The Red Sea, which had been a symbol of their impending doom, became the instrument of their salvation and the graveyard of their oppressors. It was a moment of profound, absolute victory, a definitive severing of the chains of slavery. But the wilderness that lay before them was vast and unforgiving. The journey had just begun. And the greatest challenges, the test of faith, leadership, and nation-building were yet to come. What do you believe was the most pivotal moment in Moses' early leadership? Share your thoughts below. The path to a promised land is rarely straight and often fraught with unexpected trials. The roar of the Red Sea had faded, replaced by the relentless silence of the Sinai wilderness, a vast, desolate expanse of rock and sand where the sun beat down with merciless intensity and the nights brought a chilling cold. The initial euphoria of freedom quickly gave way to the harsh realities of survival. This was not the land flowing with milk and honey. This was a land of hunger, thirst, and fear. And the people, so recently slaves, began to grumble. Their memories of Egyptian cruelty began to fade, replaced by a nostalgic longing for the fleshpots of Egypt, for the guaranteed, if miserable, sustenance of their bondage. Moses, the man who had parted the sea, now faced a different kind of adversary, the fickle, demanding heart of his own people. They cried out for water, and he struck a rock, bringing forth a spring. They cried out for food, and manna like dew fell from the sky each morning, and quail covered the ground in the evenings. These were daily miracles, constant reminders of divine provision, yet their faith remained fragile, easily swayed by discomfort and doubt. Then came Mount Sinai, a mountain shrouded in cloud, thundering with lightning, shaking with the very voice of God. It was here, amid smoke and fire, that Moses ascended to meet with the divine. For 40 days and 40 nights he remained on the mountain, receiving the 10 Commandments, the foundational laws that would govern this nascent nation, transforming them from a collection of freed slaves into a people bound by covenant and divine law. This was the birth of a nation, not just by blood, but by shared moral principles, a radical idea that would echo through millennia. Imagine the scene: Moses descending from the mountain, his face radiant, carrying 2 stone tablets etched with the very finger of God. He carried not just laws, but the blueprint for a just society, a guide for a relationship between humanity and the divine, and between human beings themselves. This was the moment of profound transformation, the moment a people received their identity, their purpose, their very soul. But while Moses was communing with the divine, a different drama unfolded at the foot of the mountain. The people, growing restless, impatient, and fearful that Moses would not return, turned to Aaron. "Come," they demanded, "make us gods who will go before us. As for this Moses who brought us up out of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." Their fear of the unknown, their craving for a tangible deity, for something they could see and touch, overwhelmed their memory of the miracles. Aaron tragically succumbed to their pressure. He gathered their gold ornaments, melted them down, and fashioned a golden calf. And before this idol, the people declared, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." They offered sacrifices, they feasted, and they celebrated with wild abandon degenerating into idolatrous revelry. The very people who had witnessed the power of the true God, who had just heard his voice from the mountain, now worshipped a golden image crafted by human hands. Moses, descending from Sinai, heard the sounds of their revelry even before he saw the calf. His heart, filled with the awe of divine presence, now broke with despair and rage. To see his people, the people he had risked everything for, betraying the very covenant they had just received, was an unbearable blow. In a fit of righteous fury, he cast down the stone tablets, shattering them at the foot of the mountain, mirroring the shattered covenant, the broken trust. He destroyed the golden calf, grinding it to dust and making the people drink the bitter powder mixed with water, a tangible taste of their betrayal. This was a moment of profound crisis. The nation, barely born, threatened to dissolve into chaos and divine wrath. Moses, in his anguish, interceded for his people, pleading with God to forgive them, even offering himself as a sacrifice if it would spare them. His leadership, tested by the desert by Pharaoh, was now tested by the very people he led, by their weakness, their infidelity, their profound human flaws. The consequences were severe. 3,000 men, those most responsible for the idolatry, were put to death. It was a harsh, brutal act, a stark reminder of the gravity of their sin and the demands of their covenant. But it was also an act of purification, a painful severing of the old ways, a desperate attempt to salvage the nascent nation. Moses then carved new tablets, and again ascended the mountain, receiving the commandments anew, a testament to God's enduring patience and his commitment to his chosen people. The journey through the wilderness would continue for 40 long years, a generation-long penance for their lack of faith, a period of purification and preparation. Moses, the reluctant leader, would continue to guide them, to teach them, to intercede for them, bearing the immense burden of their flaws and their destiny. He would lead them to the very edge of the promised land, but he himself would not enter it. The weight of leadership, the cost of their collective journey, would ultimately prove too great for even him to fully endure. What do you think was the greatest challenge Moses faced? Pharaoh's power or his own people's faithlessness? Share your thoughts below. The path to redemption is rarely easy and often demands sacrifices that echo through eternity. 40 years, 4 decades of wandering through the vast, unforgiving wilderness. The generation that had known the chains of Egypt had mostly passed away, their murmuring voices silenced by the desert sands. A new generation had risen, born in freedom, their feet hardened by the long marches, their minds shaped by the daily miracle of manna and the constant presence of the pillar of cloud and fire. They were a people forged in adversity, tempered by divine law and bound by a shared destiny. Moses, now 120 years old, stood at the precipice of their journey, his gaze fixed on the land across the Jordan River. Imagine him there, on the peak of Mount Nebo, his eyes still strong, his natural vigour undiminished, yet his heart heavy with the knowledge that he would not cross over. He had led them through the impossible, faced down Pharaoh, parted the sea, endured their rebellions, war, and brought them the very word of God. He had been their prophet, their judge, their intercessor, their shepherd. But his own moment of human failing, striking the rock in anger instead of speaking to it, had cost him the ultimate prize, entry into the promised land. It was a poignant, heartbreaking end to an epic journey, a testament to the idea that even the greatest leaders are still human, subject to human flaws and divine consequences. He saw it all: the rolling hills, the fertile valleys, the shimmering waters of the Jordan, the cities nestled among the trees, the land flowing with milk and honey, a promise made to Abraham centuries ago, now within reach. He saw the future of his people, a nation finally coming home, and in that moment, perhaps, the bitterness of his exclusion was overshadowed by the profound satisfaction of a life's work completed. He had taken a rabble of slaves and moulded them into a nation, a people with a purpose, a covenant, and a land to call their own. The mantle of leadership would now pass to Joshua, a man of courage and faith who had served Moses faithfully for decades. The transition was seamless, a testament to Moses' foresight and the divine plan. The people, having learned hard lessons in the wilderness, were ready. They were ready to fight for their inheritance, to build a society based on the laws given at Sinai, to finally fulfill the ancient promise. And so, Moses died there, on Mount Nebo, alone with God. His burial place remains unknown, a fitting end for a man whose life was so intertwined with the divine, whose legacy transcended the physical. He left behind no grand tomb, no towering monuments, only a people, a law, and an enduring story that would echo through history. The question we asked at the beginning was, what does it truly mean to lead a people burdened by history, haunted by memory, and driven by an uncompromising dream? Moses' life provides a profound answer. It means to bear the crushing weight of responsibility, to face both external enemies and internal doubts, to possess an unwavering faith in a vision others cannot yet see. It means to be both prophet and pragmatist, divine messenger and flawed human. It means to sacrifice personal desires for the greater good of a collective destiny. The destruction of their bondage in Egypt was not the end, it was the beginning. The collapse of their old identity as slaves paved the way for the creation of a new one, a free people bound by a covenant with God. The wilderness, a place of immense suffering and loss, became the crucible in which a nation was forged, its character refined, its laws established, its faith tested, and ultimately strengthened. Without the destruction of their old life, the new one could never have been built. The greatest leaders, like Moses, don't just lead people out of something. They lead them into something greater, something transformative, even if they themselves don't live to see the final fruition. Moses' legacy is not just the Ten Commandments, or the Exodus, or the parting of the Red Sea. It is the very idea of a people bound by a moral law, accountable to a transcendent God, and striving for justice and freedom. This idea, born in the desert, has shaped civilizations, inspired movements for liberation, and continues to resonate in the hearts of billions around the world. The whisper of hope that began by the Nile, nurtured in the wilderness, became the roar of a nation, a testament to the enduring power of faith, leadership, and the human spirit. What surprised you most about Moses' journey and his leadership? Share your thoughts and reflections in the comments below. Your insights enrich our understanding of these monumental figures and the timeless lessons they offer. The story of Moses reminds us that true leadership is often found not in comfort, but in the crucible, and that the promise of a better future, though unseen, can move mountains and part seas.